Strange, isn't it? Each man's life touches so many other lives. When he isn't around, he leaves an awful hole, doesn't he? This is Jill Spivey.
I'm Eddie Webb.
And I'm Chris Spivey. And today we're here to talk about definitely the first movie that we picked to discuss, not our second choice because the first one was dubious, on Genreless. It's always good to be on our totally professional podcast where everything goes right the first time and we make the right picks in movies. We don't have to record again. And to have a wonderful guest like Jill on the show.
I don't like being included in that.
Picking Jill is the only thing that's gone well on this recording so far.
Thank you. Thank you. Good Lord. The abuse I take.
I know, right? Oh,
So-
God. Like you two live together or something.
The
Something.
backstory is one of your hosts may have chosen not the best sort of Christmas movie to air for Christmas.
Chris,
And so now we're going back and we're correcting that problem that one of your hosts, it's definitely not me,
Chris,
because they just did it by jazz hands and didn't pay attention and assumed it would work out well. Still not me, definitely Eddie. And instead chose It's a Wonderful Life to discuss.
right. And then of course we tried to start recording, and then one of our hosts, who's definitely not me and definitely is Chris, got on the wrong Wi-Fi network, and we couldn't get an actual recording going. And so we talked 7 minutes about the movie we actually weren't going to talk about. Talked about that instead, and so we're going to talk about the movie that we're supposed to be talking about in a way that we can record and actually talk about. Happy holidays, everybody! Happy holidays! As you're listening to this, it's days before Christmas, and I hope you're having a good time, because boy, are we.
So while
That sounds
we
good,
did, you won't get
convincing.
To be fair, I'm actually
Wow.
having a good time. It's just not with the tech.
while you won't get the 7 minutes of discussion about the Lion in Winter that you're missing, you will get this that podcast did not have, a direct quote from the movie. I marvel at you after all these years. Still a Democratic drawbridge going down for everybody.
And that's why we didn't cover A Lion in Winter. That pretty much sums it up.
Or
But
if you prefer,
if you have the chance, it is a classic, apparently. And apparently
Allegedly.
people really like it. And it has a great cast. So if that appeals to you, go ahead.
Right.
or one more amazing quote from the movie.
Oh, God.
Love, in a world where carpenters get resurrected, anything is possible.
Apparently this podcast is just going to be Chris reading from IMDb from now on. It's just
It
read
could
IMDb
be.
pages.
What family doesn't have its ups and downs?
That's the whole quote?
That's it.
Spent more time clearing your throat than reading the quote.
I know. That's why I did that first. Add more emphasis to it, Eddie.
Emphasis acting.
Now we're just going to do John Lovitz impersonations for the next 20 minutes.
So, tell me about It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, obviously, I've seen the movies because I grew up in the 80s, and therefore it was on television all of the time. That's about it.
Jill, it's your favorite movie.
It's not my favorite. We know from last season, listeners,
Right.
that my
Scrooge.
favorite is Scrooged.
Are you sure? I thought Elf was actually high on your list. It
No, it's not
jumped
my
off
favorite.
the shelf to get to the top of your list.
Look, Elphaba on the Shelfaba. Still like the joke.
Narc on the shelf, as far as I'm concerned.
No, I mean, I've always loved It's a Wonderful Life. I love the story. I love that it harkens back to days of yore.
Mhm.
And I love the innocence of it. I mean, it truly is a very heartwarming. I don't know. How do you get better than It's a Wonderful Life for heartwarming?
Yeah,
To
true.
understand, and I always find, so Chris knows this well about me. One of my favorite things, which is why I love Scrooged, is timey-wimey kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
And so with Scrooged, you see that because he goes back in his life at different points and he goes forward in his life. And this, in a similar way, he is able to see his life or what life would be like without him.
Right.
And so I love that whole idea.
I'm just
Yeah.
curious if you're going to make some more David Tennant quotes while you're at it with the whole timey-wimey bit before we got
I mean,
going
I
to this.
knew I was like hitting on something that might resonate with the audience here. So,
Well, certainly the two hosts.
yeah.
So, all right. So for It's a Wonderful Life, I have actually not seen that movie this much until we got married. I think I saw it maybe once beforehand
Right.
because I don't know if I mentioned before on the podcast, but my Christmas movie that has not changed since I was 7 years old, that Jill will not watch with me, that my daughter will not watch with me, is the animated Hobbit from
I watched
1977.
I watched it once.
And she's like, "You won't stop singing. Why would I sit here and watch this with you?" The
couldn't hear the
greatest
movie.
adventure.
I couldn't hear the movie. But yes, the animated Hobbit from 1977 is his favorite. 1977 was a very good year, the year I was born.
I was 3.
Oh, well, there you go. See? I'm the baby of the group here. But yes, he that is his favorite, and it shall be played in our house, and he shall watch it, and the rest of us shall go about our business.
Find literally anything else to do is what I'm hearing.
So Eddie, we've said what our favorite Christmas movies are. What is your favorite Christmas movie?
I don't have one, actually.
If you had to pick one, because I asked you randomly on air, what would it be? What people are missing is he's taking out a dartboard from behind him with names of Christmas movies on it.
Well, I have one.
Eddie, I mean, I'm going to out you here a little bit.
Uh-oh.
You're a Christmas Eve baby.
It's true. I am.
And you do harbor a little resentment that everything is closed on Christmas.
Ooh.
You are correct, actually. I have complicated feelings about Christmas because I was born on Christmas Eve, and so I would not often get birthday parties unless it was very far away from my actual birthday in order to actually accommodate literally anybody else in the world. And B, the dreaded this present is for your birthday and for Christmas.
That's lame.
Hate that.
Yes.
That's totally lame. And I will tell you, let me just, you know what, make it all about me.
So easy to make the next joke.
So Chris and I almost share a birthday.
Ooh, okay.
We are one day apart. Mm-hmm. Super annoying. At first it was cool because we were young and we would have parties together and they would be awesome.
And like all of our parties, no one ever wants to leave a Spivey party. No one wants to leave a Spivey
party. And who would, right? But here's the deal. So not only am I sharing my birthday with Sir Christopher, it also generally falls around Mother's Day, which now that I'm a mom.
Oh.
So I get the short end of the stick like 2 times over.
Wow.
I don't like that.
Wow,
so
that
yes,
sucks.
I just made it about me, and I apologize, but I had to bring that into the conversation.
No, because you've saved me from trying to make a decision, so I appreciate that.
So, Eddie, much to your own pain, I had an aunt who was born on December 24th, and every year she encountered the exact same things that you've stated, and I think she feels very similarly about the holidays you do.
And to be fair, like I don't dislike Christmas, but how I kind of handled it honestly was a lot of my friends who had very complicated feelings about Christmas as well because of family issues or whatnot. They would say things like they would celebrate my birthday instead. It's like, oh, we're going to celebrate International Eddie Day rather than Christmas. And I'm like, okay, if that's what makes you feel better, great.
I love that.
But also because of the blurring of it, right? People would sometimes kind of overreact and be like, oh, we won't play Christmas music. You won't do any Christmas movies. Like, no, I don't mind Christmas stuff, right? It's not like I hate it. I enjoy the holiday well enough. But it's just, I don't get into it. You know, I don't do the well, which should be a month-long ramp up, but over the years has become a 2-month-long ramp up because for some reason the Thanksgiving border has been transgressed and Christmas is now invading, and Halloween is next on the list, so you better be ready for that.
You shall not pass.
Pretty soon it's going to be just Christmas all year round, right? It's going to be like just December 26th. It's going to be just the start of Christmas next year.
I have a friend who starts counting down from the end of Christmas to the next Christmas, which I just, I mean,
that's ridiculous.
Come on.
Right. Right.
So I don't need Eddie to tell me what his favorite Christmas movie is because I already know what it is.
What is it?
It's Batman Returns with fucking penguins with fucking ass like rocket launchers that they shoot at Batman. It is the worst Batman movie ever. Is Eddie's favorite Christmas movie.
It is technically a Christmas movie by definition you put forward, as we discussed. But no, like in terms of a movie I think of when I think of the holiday, frankly, honestly, when it comes to mind is usually a Charlie Brown Christmas. That is one that I remember seeing a lot as a kid and liking a lot as a kid. So that is probably, if I had to pick a Christmas movie, it probably would actually be a Charlie Brown Christmas.
It's a good one. I say yes.
Tiny little tree.
I mean, from the Jewish girl over here, just so we can also clarify, like, I didn't grow up celebrating Christmas. And yet I love the holiday. I love the spirit of it. I mean, my childhood memories of Christmas was my aunt having parties on Christmas for all of our Jewish relatives. So she would have like a big party and we would go to that. So I didn't feel like I was missing out too much. I remember the first time I trimmed a tree was when I was in 8th grade with my friend Carolyn. And I was like, I have no idea what is happening here. We were singing carols. We were doing all sorts of stuff. Yeah. So I've been dumped into this world in a good way by Mary and Chris. So
and now you're an expert at putting up Christmas trees, hanging lights.
You guys, it's too much. It's just too much. Like, I don't know. With Hanukkah, you put up a menorah, you light some candles, and like you call it a day. Well, you call it 8 days, but
oh.
I will say though, having moved to the UK, there isn't really a Thanksgiving buffer, so basically it's just 2 solid months of Christmas, and I just have to accept that. But B, I do get the lights thing more because by the time it gets around December, we get like 6 hours of daylight. You know, I mean, I get light at 8 a.m. and then like by 3 p.m. it's dark. So having lights around the house is actually mentally helpful. You know, so it's just like constantly sitting in the dark. So I do understand kind of how the putting lights everywhere in the house thing actually came about. It makes a lot of sense now to me.
Interesting. It makes sense. Yeah.
Because boy, as soon as it got starting dark, it's like we have like lights in the outside, we have lights around the window, we have just so like the second I can, it's like start turning lights on because we stave off the depression. It's so dark outside.
All right. So
anyway, about this movie.
About this movie, and to show you how much everyone has loved this movie, our child is still yet to ever watch this movie. So there's at least one person in our household that has never seen It's a Wonderful Life.
Has Ziggy seen it?
Well, Ziggy seen it.
Yes, Ziggy has, and she actually watched it, which was a little disconcerting.
So the dog also loves the movie. Excellent.
Yeah, I think it's, like it is it's not that long of a movie, but I don't know. Our kid isn't into black and white movies yet. And I wasn't either at her age. I mean, I thought they were boring. I didn't understand.
I was, though.
Well, mazel tov. But
mind you, we were so poor we couldn't afford a color television, so we had a little black and white TV, so everything was black and white.
Yep, I know that feeling.
Well, no, we did have a 13-inch that was black and white. I do remember that one.
That's what we had. It was like a little small black and white TV on top of a big color TV that was broken for about 6 years of my childhood.
Sounds
back when televisions could also be tables.
Yes.
Oh god.
But yeah, I mean this movie is iconic.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume those who are listening probably have watched the movie, and I think you can get a lot of different things out of it. It is a romance for sure. That's part of it. In addition to the Christmas stuff. It is about their relationship, and it's, to me, that's actually the one of the more I don't want to say realistic parts of it, but the one of the more raw parts of it is their relationship,
Mhm.
and how, you know, I think about her, which she's kind of like a minor character in it, but she's such a big, big part of it.
Yeah.
And what she puts up with from George, not just puts up with, but how she supports him and how she runs the family, and she's the one with the dreams that she makes sure that, that those come true, but then she also kind of holds him back from traveling. So I don't know, there's a lot to that story of their relationship, just the two of them.
Yeah. I mean, like, when I was, watching it, so full disclosure, I've said before I've seen it a few times, but it's always been kind of it's on in the TV in the room with me kind of watching. So this is the first time that I actually sat down and really closely paid attention to the movie, and there's a lot of stuff that was fascinating to me. One of them was, like you're saying, their relationship feels real in a very surprising way in the movie made in 1946, because they're not stereotypes. They have for a Hollywood movie, a relatively realistic relationship. And so it's like she's not just a dutiful housewife. She has her own opinions and ideas. And she and George sometimes clash and sometimes agree, but it's not overplayed, right? It's just she has opinions, he has opinions, and they actually talk and generally have a good relationship, except for at points of drama, obviously. And it just the whole thing just felt like a very honest relationship to me. Like these are just two people who are genuinely trying to figure things out. It was a bit weird getting there because there's all kind of it's going to be a love triangle, then it just stops being one.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it's a fun relationship, and also kind of creepy to have a small child whisper into your deaf ear that she's gonna love you forever. And it's like that's not a great way to start that, but
Do either of you know the actual origins of the movie?
no.
It was a book, wasn't it?
It was a book written by, so it was a short story written by someone, I want to say from like the Civil War era almost, that they tried to get published that no one would publish. So they put it into a Christmas card that they had, and they sent it to like 200 of their friends. And somehow it got in the hands of a producer that went, this would be a good movie. And they bought they bought the movie rights for $10,000.
Wow.
And then it went through the Hollywood system at the time, and it had dozens of writers constantly going and changing it. Because one of the
That sounds
original
about right.
ideas was that George was going to be a politician, and
Huh.
he wasn't. He lost an election, and that's why he's going to try to commit suicide.
That would not have been as good.
No. And it's like a fascinating like backstory to it. And how originally went through two different studios, I think, and one of the studios originally had Cary Grant cast in the role as George. And there was some Henry Fonda in there too, but they chose Cary Grant when it was with that studio. Could you imagine this movie with Cary Grant?
That would just be so weird.
It would be weird. Although young Cary Grant, like if you think about um what's the one? Oh my god. Bringing Up Baby. Things like that where he, like it's a different side of Cary Grant.
Hey Jill,
What?
what's Bring Up Baby? For our
It's
listeners that may not be familiar with the movie, Eddie gets this all the time when he makes references.
I know,
it's
it's not me for once, thank God.
it's an old movie. I don't know. It's an old movie with
There you
Cary
go.
Grant, and it's it's a great movie. It's a comedy. So if you're looking for something light, go for that one.
Mhm.
Okay.
I'm not going to get into the whole plot or whatever, but partly because my memory is terrible and I probably don't remember it
Right?
all.
I forget all the time.
Chris is always like quizzing me on stuff. He's like, "Don't you remember when?" I'm like, "Nope, don't remember. Don't remember any of that. Nope."
But like For me, it's like, I mean, yeah, sure. I suppose there would be a way that Cary Grant is, but to me, Jimmy Stewart is so the everyman, right?
Yeah.
Um, and just little things like his almost iconic stutter. Uh, it, 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 it it's very much a Hollywood stutter, right? It's not something that emulates how people actually stutter, but it comes across like he's speaking, emoting from the heart. It sounds like he's saying stuff extemporaneously, obviously rehearsed lines. And those kinds of things, and his mannerisms and his physicality, all really play to this perfect synergy of very attractive Hollywood style man, but also someone that anyone can see themselves in his shoes. And he just always nails it every movie I've seen him in.
Yeah, he's amazing. I'll watch any movie he's in.
Hmm.
He was actually going to
Not
turn
that
down the role because he just got back from the war, and he didn't think acting was really serious enough for something he wanted to pursue anymore, because he wasn't sure how important it was after everything that he did over there.
Wow.
And it was because the actor that played Potter convinced him to go and do that.
Oh,
He's like,
really?
you did all
Lionel
you,
Barrymore.
yeah. He's like, you killed, well, really, you killed all those people. Don't you think you could then do something to go and inspire other people as be even more important?
Wow.
I mean, the actor who played Potter, so Lionel Barrymore is like, a storied actor
Hmm.
who Drew Barrymore's great uncle, in case anybody is
Oh,
wondering.
okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean, he brings definitely the gravitas to that role. I mean, there's no nuance to that role, which is unfortunate. Like, I don't like bad guys who are always bad, or who you don't see the humanity in that person. And Potter is pretty one note. I mean, he's just a
Oh, yeah.
terrible person.
He's the Monopoly man. Yeah, he's
Right,
Eddie
right.
Warbucks. Yeah.
I think it would have been more interesting to see him in a more nuanced way, like some sort of, maybe his motivations are not just make all the money and be a terrible person and be mean and all of that. Um, I think that, but I also understand that they wanted to villainize him, and
Well,
for the purposes of the story.
it's interesting that you brought that up specifically because the Potter character breaks the Hays Code model of the time. Because back then, villains couldn't have shown to have been successful. Like they
Oh,
need
that's
to learn to
right.
repent, they need to be caught. Potter is evil throughout the movie, and he gets to keep all the money. So he
Hmm.
effectively wins without being stopped. Now I'm curious if it because Barrymore was such like an established actor, they were like, it's okay, or if it was
Mm,
something else.
Right.
yeah.
And remind me, the movie didn't do well, right?
Oh no, it was a commercial and financial flop.
Wow. Okay. Did you know? Did it actually get dinged by the Hays Code, or is it just kind of skate flow under the radar, or was it so bad that no one even paid attention to it?
I mean, it got
Uh,
terrible reviews at first, I think,
yeah,
um and it kind of didn't see the light of day until the 1970s. So that's what, like 30 years later.
Oh, wow. Okay.
it lost money for I forgot the name of the person still, but they made their own studio called like Liberty Bell. Liberty Bell made
Right.
2 movies, and this is one of them. And it lost
Really?
was it $50,000 or like half a million, something obscene amount of money on in the end.
Yeah, I think it was half a million. They lost $500,000. No, they lost, yeah, $500,000 on the movie. But then
And
in the 1970s, the copyright um
Expired or whatever.
expired.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's when everybody wanted to just show it everywhere.
well, it's cheap. That's how it always happens.
Yeah. Capitalism at work, right? How meta.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
meta.
I mean,
Almost like we're seeing it
that's
right now in the real world.
well, yeah. But like, I mean, I get it. Like, it's sometimes some of the stuff we now see as Christmas films or iconic films is because they were cheap to run. It's similar to nowadays. Mystery Science Theater is seen as very much a Thanksgiving uh, uh, tradition because
Hmm.
you could rent just same theater episodes relatively cheap and run them on Thanksgiving Day when they don't expect people to be watching very often. Same kind of idea. But yeah, I mean, it's weird that how these things get reinvigorated by later generations and re-examined, maybe is a better word I'm looking for, as people kind of go, oh, now that I'm seeing this, it's actually not as bad as all that. And certainly in some ways, it has aged surprisingly well. I mean,
Well, and that's what I mean, to see recent critics who've like written, not more recent than the
right.
1940s and 50s. They say that it's a classic for a good reason. I mean, it does hold up, and there are so many things that, while some of the stuff is a little dated, because of the time in which it was made, the themes and a lot of the dynamics could be easily today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. I mean, people losing their homes, rich bank owners putting it down on little people, people coming back from war and being devastated by that experience. These are all things that are evergreen, sadly.
Mm-hmm. And, obligation, feeling obligation to family,
Yeah.
That theme to me is a really strong piece of it. He could have gone and traveled the world. He had these big dreams, and because of his obligation to family, his obligation to his town, he didn't do any of that. But he creates another and maybe a better life for himself. We would never know,
Mm-hmm.
by being there.
Yeah, and it's just
Chris is like, I don't buy it. You think
I
he would have had a better life if he hadn't been tied down to the
You could say the grass is always greener, but it's the fact that it was an obligation that kept him there, but he didn't want to be there. So then now I would look at it as how present was he in those moments past having to feel the need to have to be there to do those things. Like I feel there's a dark undercurrent to the movie that's not always brought out. For instance, like the fact that it's going to be suicide that he's going to do because everything's gone so wrong. That is a completely dark topic, much less to have that be in 1946 for a movie.
No, I think that's actually very fair. It is a surprisingly dark movie, because the stuff you mentioned, but also, I mean, just things like the fact that a small business is being crushed, and as a result, people are ultimately going to be made homeless. The fact is that he walks right up to the line of domestic abuse in his darkest moments. He damn near drinks himself to death at one point. It is a very dark film. In modern parlance, George Bailey has big feelings, and it's pretty clear. But it's interesting because the way that Stewart plays the character, he decides to. We're getting into the plot of the movie, and we'll talk about it more when we get there. But like just at a high level, he wants to go somewhere. He's very excited about it. He makes a decision, and the lines he's given don't really indicate any of the undercurrent that he's going through. But the way he's playing it, you could sense it at moments through the way he says the line, the way he holds his face, the way he holds himself, is that there is that regret there. And so I chalk a lot of that undercurrent to just what he brings to the role, which is great.
Yeah.
As we're so close now. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, if we're talking about some of the dark undercurrents, one of the things that this movie does in a less obvious way is also bring up the prejudice against Italian people in the town. I mean, it's not something that now we might think about, like, oh, Italians are discriminated against. That's not top of the list of marginalized groups.
Mhm.
But at the time, immigrants, and Martini, Mr. Martini, that was, I thought, really interesting and well done, because it was part of the story. It was just part of the story. It wasn't an entire focus, but it was part of the story, and it was crystal clear. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, also it's 46. I mean, it wasn't that much earlier that we were fighting Italy, you know?
That's true. That's true.
As we're pretty much knocking on the door to the movie now, do we want to talk about any of the back history of the movie? Do you want to move directly just into sort of like the plot itself of the movie and go through the beats?
Y'all know the back history better than I do, so I will happily let you tell me about it.
Is there anything else you'd like to touch on, Jill?
From the history point of view, or from just
Yeah,
in
like the
general?
backstory of the movie before we move into the movie proper.
Oh, I found it interesting. I know very little about Frank Capra, who was the director of the
Yeah.
movie. And in reading a little bit about him, I mean, he sounds like he was a pretty difficult person to work with.
Oh, really?
He went through multiple directors of photography. He went through a host of writers.
Including the phenomenal Dorothy Parker, by the way, in case anyone's curious.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think I read that the union had to get involved when it came to deciding how to list the names of the writers who were involved, because there were so many.
hmm
And
Some of them didn't want their
so,
name listed anymore when the movie was made.
yeah. So he was
Wow.
not an easy person. And I would be interested to get more of a perspective on that. I mean, clearly he had a vision for the movie, um, but like at
But
what
come on,
expense? Hmm.
they filmed like in the middle of summer during a heat wave, and when people are getting heat exhaustion, he did occasionally give them a random day off.
I'm not saying he was a horrible person. I'm not saying he was a horrible person. I don't know the man. I just know that he was very difficult to work with. I mean, it's one thing to have, okay, you had a something with one person, but when you have like
Oh
multiple
yeah, like
groups that
90% of the people.
right. I mean, it's a wonder that this thing actually made it to the screen,
Yeah.
you know.
Wow.
Because
Um,
the other really cool part though is, I say cool, it's fascinating for me, is that he didn't think that Donna Reed was a Midwestern as she was. That a cow randomly on set, and he's like, I bet you $50 you can't milk that cow. And she went over, she milked it, and I think she's quoted as saying, "It's the easy $50 I've ever made." Because this was like her Donna Reed's first like movie role.
Oh,
don't
really?
don't
Yeah,
underestimate a woman. My God,
she was like
no one
what,
learned
maybe
this.
25 when the film was made.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I know random stupid bits about the history of the movie. Also, the FBI put it on its communist list because they're like, look at that plot, communists making that banker evil. That's anti-American.
That sounds like the FBI. I was going to say
It's
1947, but I
Hoover.
just realized it should stop.
Well, it's also Hoover at the time. So,
Right.
God, we could like a whole podcast about
Communes.
Hoover. All right.
Uh,
Anything else backstory before we get into the movie? We've been rambling on for a while. I know that Jill wants to talk about her second favorite Christmas movie ever, right after Scrooge, but before Elf.
well, to be fair, that's technically true. Elf is below this movie. That is correct.
Don't bust on Elf. It's a good movie. It's a modern classic.
Oh God.
Next year, maybe that's what we'll talk about.
Oh my God.
I'm sure
Listeners,
Matthew would happily come
if
on
you
and
want
do
us to
that
talk
with you,
about
the
Elf
two of you.
next year, you let us know.
I think I do Batman Returns again before I did Elf.
Okay. Done. This is live. This is recorded. You take it back now.
All right, Jill, would you like to read the opening paragraph?
I would love.
Or would you like
nothing
me to
more.
do it?
I'll do it. We open with a ringing bell and a Christmas postcard rolling us into the credits. On Christmas Eve, 1945, in Bedford Falls, New York, George Bailey contemplates suicide. The prayers of his family and friends reach heaven, where guardian angel second class Clarence Oddbody is assigned to save George to earn his wings. Clarence is shown flashbacks of George's life. He watches 12-year-old George rescue his younger brother, Harry, from drowning, leaving George deaf in his left ear. George later saves the pharmacist, Mr. Gower, from accidentally poisoning a customer.
No, it's not the most important thing, but Oddbody instantly makes me think of like either a James Bond villain or something like that based on the name. Just
Right.
Yeah.
put that there.
Yeah.
Goodbody would make it the James Bond love interest.
Yes. Yes. So for some reason, this whole like introductory stuff, I had zero memory of. So I'm like, first time I watched, I'm like, am I watching the correct movie? Did I misremember this movie? For some reason in my head, it starts when the next paragraph we're going to talk about. So I'm watching the scene in heaven as all the flashing lights talking to each other, and I'm like, this is a Star Trek episode. This is.
It is.
It feels very sci-fi.
Yeah. It is a strange thing. I mean, I love the postcard opening. I think it like immediately, and maybe they didn't know this at the time, but it very much centers the world that they're in, which I really like. But yes, the constellations business is a little.
I want to hear this piece. Place. Yes. What about heaven, Jill, and the constellations?
No, it just seems out of place with the rest of the movie.
How would you feel if we didn't have that, though, when Clarence shows up later and claims to be an angel? Would that be
you need
harder
to have
believe?
some sort of scene? But it's interesting, right? Because I think now, if they were to film this now, they would probably show you a big white fluffy room with Clarence in it, and you know what I mean? Like you would see him.
Yeah.
I mean, we will find out because this is actually the process of being remade.
Nuh-uh.
Yep. Earlier this year,
What?
Kenya Barris is attempting to remake It's a Wonderful Life from Blackish.
But Eddie, they already had a remake of this in the 90s, I think. It was called something else, though, but it was a remake of Wonderful Life, but it focused on Mary, like the wife, instead of George, if I remember right.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, but I mean, I could argue that, like, honestly, I think you'd even just cut the entire heaven scene. Because just having Clarence show up, say, I'm a guardian angel, and having both the audience and George go, this guy's just crazy.
Yeah.
Would actually play pretty well.
Yeah. And then you realize, like, you only realize that he's for real. Mm-hmm. And the whole conversation could be like, that we would be having right now would be, is Clarence really a guardian angel? Or is George Bailey just, like losing his mind a little bit?
Right.
Well, it wasn't made yet, though. That would feel more like a Twilight Zone episode, though, than It's a Wonderful Life.
Different sci-fi.
A different thing.
Because if you cut all the heaven bit, you could then just make it into like an alien story completely. Yeah.
But and that's what thing is so fascinating about this movie is because it is in a genre of Chris movie, which is a very specific genre we've talked about. But if you take that element away from it, try to classify, it's not quite a fantasy. It's not quite a science fiction movie. It's not quite a drama. It's not quite a romance. It's like all of these things in a way. Because there's time travel, there's alternate realities, multiverse. It's a multiverse story.
Well, if there's only one other reality, does it count as a multiverse?
It is not a universe.
It'd be a duoverse.
Duoverse? Right, whatever.
A duology. A duoverse. Oh.
Yes.
There's the jokes that just hit me right now. I'm trying not to say any of them.
But like also, the movie is initially framed as like the Clarence and his boss, who may or may not be God, talking about George's life, and so you get the flashbacks and the lead up to George's life through that context, and then that gets dropped, but it gets brought back suddenly later in the film. So, like, it's definitely. I mean, you told me a lot of writers worked on this. I can kind of see that now that we're talking about it.
Yeah.
But the upshot of that is that also it ends up being a little bit transgressive in terms of it doesn't quite fit neatly into any of the certainly none of the 1946 genres of movie.
Okay, if it's not the big G who is signing out the orders, well, all right. If it's not God, could it be Gabriel? I'm trying to figure out like the order of things because we've established they're angels, and angels are frequently associated with the religious connotation of God. So that
Right.
is where that would go, and even in the summary it says heaven, so that has that all there.
Right. I had honestly, when I first watched it, I interpreted it as a more senior angel. You know, because they simply call him Angel Second Class, which implies the existence of Angel First Class.
But that would be the other person that's there that's telling him once you're sort of migrated, you'll understand that. So
Right.
the over person has to be, I would assume, God, because if you have like an angel first class, angel second class, and Clarence the second class debating with first class, and ever so often the overlord jumps in.
I mean, there are different hierarchies of angel. I think there's 7 different levels of angel. No, 7 choirs of angel, that's different than their hierarchy.
Yes.
It's been a while since I've done the angel reference stuff. Angels are weird, by the way. Like, if you ever read like actual straight up angels, they're like have like they're wheels made of fire, and they have like eyes all over their body. They're not nice people.
No.
They're
Almost
crazy.
mythos inducing. Jill,
Right. Yeah.
do you want us to move away from this because you're staring at the screen really hard right now? Like,
I mean,
why are you stuck on this hierarchy thing, Chris? Stop it.
yeah, it's like it doesn't really. Also, like angels, there are angels in the Jewish faith,
Mhm.
but it's a different. Angels are seen as messengers more in the Jewish faith, so it's a different. Oh,
Yeah.
Ziggy's going crazy. I can hear her.
Zig has opinions.
Someone's front door. But yeah,
Uh,
so angels being messengers, I think, is an interesting thought when you're thinking about Clarence.
oh, okay.
Who, maybe it's the whole idea of guardian angel, I think is, kind of ridiculous. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some people believe in it, so I apologize. But the idea that he's getting a message or he's learning something through this angel, to me, is more apt for what's happening, which is not that he's being guarded. He's being given a message.
You know, now that you say that, that's actually interesting because if I remember correctly, Clarence has called himself Guardian Angel at some point, but how he acts, he does kind of the exact opposite of Guardian George, right? It's the um, he doesn't stop him from killing himself. He endangers himself to push George into making a decision. That's not guarding him. That's taunting him, right?
Right.
So,
Right. It's getting him to hear him. It's getting him to listen,
right.
which is a different thing than when you think of guarding someone is covering them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And this isn't covering him. It is exposing him, really.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if the concept of guardian angel is to protect someone, Clarence protects him by leaping in, forcing George to fall back on what we've established. George feels an overwhelming sense of obligation to save Clarence, which protects George from killing himself.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, yes.
But my argument is that Clarence is standing right next to George. He just pull him back, but instead. So I mean, that's actually opens up a whole other thing. It's like, is Clarence tangible? Because it's something that
He
I
has to
don't
be.
see him actually talking to anybody.
We'll get there eventually, but he is accosted by the police and he has to beg for them to make him disappear.
That's right. Okay, I did forget that part.
All right, so since we're bouncing all over today, I am gonna choose the professional route and rein us in a little bit more.
Well, before we move on, though, I do want to, unrelated to the angel stuff, on the personal level, I again did not know this first part actually even existed, and so George being half deaf really stuck with me. I mean, I've talked before on the podcast about my own hearing loss and not seeing very many people that are not centers of fun with people with hearing loss. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, I didn't even know this. How do they handle the hearing loss of George in the movie? And it's a surprise. It comes up a fairly regular amount throughout the course of the
Yeah.
movie. And particularly in the soda shop where she whispers in his ear, "Is this your bad ear?" And then she whispers in his ear and he can't hear it. There's plenty of times where he's talking to Mr. Gower and how the child actor is orienting himself to make sure that his good ear is pointed towards Mr. Gower. I noticed that stuff, and so that there was thought. And later on, they're minor scenes, so they don't really touch on the plot so much. But like every once in a while, George will make a note, like, "Oh, you're talking in my bad ear," point to his other ear, or he'll say, "What, huh?" At very natural moments, and so I really felt like Stewart, in particular, paid attention to how does this change my place in the scene with hearing loss. And it's
Wow.
something that if you're kind of just half watching the movie, because they're all small moments, you can easily miss over them. But because I'm watching it carefully and I noticed that, I was like, oh, this actually is a really big thing. And so it, for my own personal reasons, it made me like this movie a heck of a lot more because I can now add just the extremely short list of characters with hearing loss that are given very positive representation in media culture.
That's super interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Also, Mr. Gower almost murdered somebody.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
So I have, I've worked at the same organization for 13 years. I work
Mhm.
at an organization that certifies pharmacy technicians. Okay.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah. So this is very close to my heart because one of the things that technicians often do is they catch the near misses, right? They catch the
Mhm.
medication errors, and as do pharmacists. But I think this is probably the first film that shows a pharmacy technician, which is essentially what the role that Bailey is playing here,
Mhm.
um, you know, catching a medication error,
Yeah.
um, which I've always thought, like, how can I bring that? So I do marketing for our organization. I'm like, how can I bring this into our marketing? Because I feel
Yeah.
like that this is, it truly, it's such an important role, which is obvious emphasized in this film. And, you know, we all have bad days, right? Like everyone has
Mhm.
a bad day, and Gower had a terrible day. I mean, the worst of the worst. So to expect him to be able to not have someone check his work, right? Which is something you always hope in healthcare that there will be somebody doing a double check on things.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I thought that was it's pretty an interesting thing
And
from,
it's such a raw scene too,
oh,
right? Like Gower's emotions are just on the surface, and you could just in that very short space, you could see how much pain he's in. And then when he frankly he beats George, and it's an uncomfortable scene. And so we see young George going, "But you were gonna mess up. That's okay. I stopped it. I made sure that you were okay. I didn't do anything wrong." And is that was for me one of the most efficient film moments of making someone a hero. It's like in that short moment, it's like, okay, I see the heroism in George right away. And I really bought into George being that kind of good guy very, very quickly.
So something I read is that, and I don't know how true it is, but I read the actor was actually drunk that day
Oh
for
shit.
that scene, and that was a real thing that happened. Like the blood in the ear was not scripted; but it was like a real thing.
Fuck.
I didn't have time to like go and double check it, but I'm going to put it out.
I hope that is not true because it told that kid's eardrum got burst.
I don't know if the blood was real, but I also read that he was a method actor, and so the
Okay.
drinking and the hitting were real.
Yeah,
Okay.
So, but regardless, and
Because I mean, I would say I did notice that when he hits young George the first time, the kid actor pulled his head back and away in a way that he could have put something in his ear. So when he came back around the camera, there was something in his ear.
Oh,
So I had
interesting.
thought he'd just put like a little blood packet in his ear, and then popped it and
Yeah,
then pulled
could
around.
be, but
I hope
yeah.
so.
But
I hope that's what happened.
either way,
Either
incredibly
way.
disturbing, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah, it's a
and that
gripping
scene,
scene.
like you said, is
Yeah.
very. I mean, I think that's the first moment that I start to tear up. It's like
Yeah.
the first point of the movie that I start to tear up for sure.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, like how I think it was Mary whispered in his bad ear, we also get the other potential could have been love interest for the movie also right there.
Right.
So you have the three of them at the start to see that they've lived in this town their entire lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Already
Yeah.
establishing that no one escapes this town.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anything else about this piece before we move on?
Nope. Let's move on.
In 1928, George plans a world grand tour before college. He reintroduced to Mary Hatch, who has loved him since childhood. When his father dies from a sudden stroke, George postpones his travel to settle the family business. Bailey Brothers Building and Loan. Board members Henry Potter, who owns the bank, and most of the town seeks to dissolve the company. But the board directors vote to keep it open on one condition: that George runs it. George acquiesces and works alongside his Uncle Bill, giving his tuition savings to his younger brother Harry, with the understanding that Harry will take over after he graduates college.
Mm. And again, for me, watching this, I kind of this part was okay. I know these beats that George is trying to go away, but he ends up running his dad's business. That part I knew. But watching it closely this time, I really noticed how Stewart's acting changes from when he thinks he's going to go on his world tour, and then how the manic energy just gets damped down when he has to think about his family's business. Um, and during the board scene, he's like, "Okay, I'll just do this. I'll just do this. Let me just get through this." And then the way he starts talking when he starts to have to speak out in his father's defense, it almost feels like he can't quite choke it out. It's like he's trying to hold it back, and then it just kind of spills out of him. The way he delivers the line, he almost jerks forward as he's talking. So you can almost see like his reluctance to get involved because he feels like as soon as he opens his mouth, he knows what's going to happen, and then the resignation after he says it of like, I know where this is going to lead, is this really really great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also thought, there's the scene at the dinner table, which unnecessary. They have the dinner table at the Bailey household with Ma Bailey and Pa Bailey before Pa Bailey dies. That would be weird if he was,
Just prop him up at the end of the table.
But
Be early for Weekend at Bernie's, wouldn't it?
I mean, again, that scene is totally unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
But it establishes the dynamic of the family so well. And I actually read that the actress playing the mother played Jimmy Stewart's mother 5 times in different films.
Nice.
Which I find, kind of endearing. How lovely. I wonder how that happened. Was that he said, "Hey, this woman is great as my mom. Like, let's bring her on," or did the directors just know, or how that worked? But anyway, I just think that scene, and look, it's the only one where we have a Black person in it, right? Right? Isn't that the only scene?
It's the second scene. I always keep an eye out for that. You know me
Yeah,
well. And it's not the best Black role either.
It's not the best, but she has great lines in it. I mean, it is not the best role, but she makes it like she is clearly a member of this family.
I forgot the actress from the 40s that said it, but it was something along the lines like I could play a maid, I could be a maid and make, was it like $4 a week or something, or I could play one in a movie and make $400 a week.
Oh jeez. Yeah.
But that scene, I just find that an interesting choice by the director to say, like, we're going to establish this family dynamic. You learn about the brothers, how they relate to each other. You learn about, George and his respect for his mother, which then comes back when, he goes to her home in his alternate lifeline, and she doesn't know who he is, and she's running a boarding house and that sort of thing. Like, I just thought it's just such a smart thing to include. Yeah.
Like, I feel it's essential to the plot, though, because without that, we wouldn't have a basis for understanding of George's constant sense of obligation and dedication to his family and everyone else.
Yeah.
So it's rooted in that family scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I think it's fair to say that no plot dialogue happens in that scene, but it is important for emotional and relationship building. So I think you're both kind of right on that level, in the sense that without this scene, all you know is that George is a good guy. With the scene, he's a good guy, but also this is why he cares so much about his family business. So
And
I do get kind of both sides of that.
And
Yeah.
a similar part plays out when he gets his suitcase to travel for the community, where he shows him the suitcase and everything else. And George tells him the one they want. And he's like, I've already got one for you. And he gives it to him for free because Gower has already paid for it. So it's shown that throughout from childhood till now, George has been a constant part of the community and everyone cares about him. And that's reinforced again. He walks her down the street and everyone knows who he is.
Right. Similar to how Shaft walked down the street and everyone knew who he was.
Shut your mouth.
These movies are basically the same, right?
Basically the same.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Although I don't think I could see Jimmy Stewart in Shaft's leather coat. Other than that, exact same movie.
Yes, just give the same dialogue to both actors. It's the same.
I could see Jimmy Stewart ending the movie by saying "shitty," and then we cut directly to credits. Jill didn't watch Shaft with me, so she's missing these jokes.
I am missing.
You are.
Yes.
Amazing film.
Yes.
And if you want to know more about Shaft, you can back to Darkest through Patreon.
So, all right, Jill, for your interest, I am horrible at self promotion, as you know, but Eddie is right there constantly promoting.
God bless Eddie.
Yeah,
Someone on this podcast has to get you money.
Clarence is looking out for you.
Right.
That high school with the pool that sort of opens from under the gym is a real place. I didn't know that before that. I did some research on this because I was curious about it.
Does the thing still work?
Yes, it still works to this day.
Really?
That's cool.
Because I thought it was just for the movie.
I have to think that they put some security around the button, though, now. Like, there's got to be some.
Well, I don't think Alfalfa's running around pushing buttons anymore.
I know. What about that Alfalfa, like, guest star? That's pretty cool.
All right, Eddie. Do you know who Alfalfa is, Eddie?
Yeah, he's a kid actor. I forget the name of the show, though, but like...
He's a little...
Rascal. That's it. Little Rascals.
Yes, Little Rascal.
Thank you.
Yeah, he plays
the guy. I was like, I know the show you're referencing, but I didn't remember the name of it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's it was so cool when you see him. Oh, I'll get into that later. We're not at that part of the movie.
So regardless of anything else, George should be taking a bullet for his brother because his brother is the one that introduces him to Mary again at the dance, and that's where they really connect.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And I admit that this is one part where initially I was a little confused because they were clearly setting up for a kind of a romantic triangle. And then 10 minutes later, that subplot is just cut off at the knees. And I'm like, What is going on here? It does pay off later, but it definitely feels like it was a thread that was introduced probably in an earlier draft of the script, never quite got smoothed out.
Yeah, agree. Right.
What did we think of after the pool incident and they're in their makeshift clothes walking back in the house? Like that house. I want to move into that house.
That house is amazing. Also, all I kept thinking was, how much money does it take to keep this house up? Like the heat bills, all that stuff.
Right.
It's a giant house. Like, it's a really big house. But yes.
Yeah, like they're like, we're going to rebuild this house. And I'm like, how much money are you going to sink into this money pit?
This is the thing. And then you could, you know what? You could just make the money pit. Like you could just go
A whole different movie now.
yeah, a whole different movie, which is also a classic. The other quote that I was going to do at the beginning of this podcast was "You want the moon? Just say the word, and I'll throw a
Yeah.
lasso around it and pull it down." I love that. You know, again, it's the like dreams, you know, the big dreams kind of, which I really love.
And again, like watching it again, like I know that line, right? It's one of the ones that clip gets played so often. It's such a well-known line. So I didn't really know the scene around it, where because that line out of context makes George seem like a dreamer, and certainly the fact he's going on a world tour and whatnot implies that he has some kind of dream-like qualities. But that whole scene, that line's inside of a larger scene where he's talking about a very realistic way of living their lives. That line in context is really just, "I'll do anything for you, including giving up my dreams to make sure that we can do something here." And so that line actually plays better inside the scene as a whole because this brief poetic gesture is in a larger, very adult conversation about having a real sustainable relationship, which is fantastic. And I think sometimes the line out of context, when you hear it out of context, feels like George is kind of this silly young dreamer, and he's not. He knows exactly what he's talking about.
Interesting. Yeah. 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 And that, I read something interesting about, you know, how they throw rocks at the
Mm-hmm.
windows. So apparently, the director was ready to have like a shooter, a sharpshooter or whatever to like, for Mary, so that she could hit the window. She was like, "Psh, watch this." And she totally hit the window with it. So,
Because
I
Donna Reed
mean,
was like on
Donna
her
Reed,
baseball
quite the
team.
woman. Quite the woman. Yeah.
Yeah. Like what I found out about Donna Reed, I am blown away.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. Do I do the next one?
Sure.
Well, is there anything else we want to touch on here? Because we also get the bit with Uncle Billy, which Uncle Billy was also with Stewart in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
I thought he was in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Like a small role, but still there. And like the little God, what are they? Like the pieces of twine or string around his fingers to try to remember things. It's funny. It's a funny bit here, but it's layering the plot for later when that's going to be something else that comes up. Like that is a bit of writing that I love. So I wanted to like highlight that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. They do a lot of. I mean, obviously the focus is on George, but you're right. One thing they're doing in this chunk of the movie is and arguably the next chunk as well, is that they're putting in place all of the character, the motivations and the quirks of all of the supporting cast, because we're going to build on that both in the ramp up of tension, but also when George goes back in time to see how they change. So yeah, you're right. It is kind of a quick, and Potter obviously is the one that gets the least progression here, but also in this chunk of the movie, he also has the least screen time. Everybody else gets a little more time to actually build out an actual character.
So I would love to have gone back and seen each iteration of this script as it was made to see like what changes were made and then like what we actually see versus what was written. Like that would be so fascinating.
So what little I know of Capra is that apparently he was a fairly improvisational director. So apparently a lot of stuff he shot wasn't always what was written down on the page. So it may be hard to do that kind of archaeology.
I know, because I know part of it is like the Uncle Billy scene when he's drunk and you hear a sound off stage was like one of the hands working on the set dropped something and the actor improvised that to the scene to keep being filmed.
Nice.
And Capra liked it so much he paid that random person that dropped it. I think it was like $20 for improving the script.
And that's one of the things I love about old movies is because film was so expensive that they had to kind of get things rolling or keep things rolling. And so you see these little kind of stutters and bumps and whatnot, and the actors were so used to this because that's just how films were made that they roll with it. And so the whole, like, one thing I noticed, particularly in 40s films, is I think it's called stepping on lines, where basically people start talking over top each other.
Yeah.
And Stewart's great at this. He knows exactly which lines to kind of talk over that won't actually impede with things. And so it sounds like very natural conversation where people are both talking at the same time, much like this podcast. So, I mean, it feels like how actually people talk, even though it's, again, super heightened Hollywood dialogue that no one actually speaks in real life. But it feels like it because of he finds little interjections, ejaculations to put into conversations without actually ruining the flow of the information.
I too would say that we are as great as Jimmy Stewart at the height of his acting career.
Certainly one of us is, that's true.
And she'll be gone before we do this again.
That's true. See, that's it. You knew exactly what I was thinking of. You're right. So anything else in this chunk? Okay.
Do we want to take a moment to talk about Harry when Harry graduates and George is stuck there?
Yeah, I'll get there. So Harry returns from college, married with a job offer from his father-in-law, and George resigns himself to running the building alone. George and Mary rekindle their relationship and marry, and use their honeymoon savings to keep the company solvent during a run on the bank. Under George, the company establishes Bailey Park, a housing development surpassing Potter's overpriced slums. Potter entices George with a high-paying job, but George rebuffs him when he realizes that Potter's true intention is to close the building alone.
It's a lot.
Harry's a dick.
Really?
Harry's a dick.
This is your thesis?
Yes.
Okay.
This war hero. That's a war hero you're talking about, my friends.
Right. War hero Harry Bailey is a dick.
He's not a war hero yet. He's just an asshole who graduated college with the money I gave him so then I could leave this town that has locked me down all this time. Dick. Right now in the movie, Harry is a dick. All right. Please defend Harry right now, not future Harry, current Harry. I gave you, we'll say, $2,000 it took me 20 years to come up with. And you spent it for your education, and then you trapped me here.
Well, he was supposed to, I don't know.
He's supposed to come back and take over the business so I can leave? Yes. I'm waiting for defensive Harry.
I know, and he doesn't do it. But talk to a lot of older siblings who will feel this pain.
Eddie?
I'm not going to defend him. I'm agreeing with you.
So, in short, I will recap for you. DICK equals Harry. Done.
No,
That's it.
But one thing I like about how this scene is played is that because we had that scene earlier, the family gathering scene, we know how much George loves Harry, right? And so George isn't mad that Harry's made a decision. He's frustrated, but he's not mad. So I like it because George is also not just, oh well, I guess this is my life. I mean, he's clearly sees in Harry what he wants for himself in a way, but also the scene afterwards of George kind of talking himself into why this is okay opens up a lot of George. He's not simply just quietly resigned to it, but he's also not bitter. He's not angry about it.
But he is angry. And the thing is, like, all of this is leading up to the eventual suicide attempt. And it's layers, right. Like he's suppressing, I'm not angry. I'm pressing it down so it's fine right now.
He's not angry at his brother. He's angry at the situation.
Right. Yes. That's what.
So he's angry that his brother found a girl with a father who gave him a job that's going to give him a better life. Like, he hasn't had those same things, which, as we all know, life happens that way sometimes when someone gets better because of happenstance, right? Like, they just happen to. And I also think Harry doesn't have George's same sense of obligation. And this will also play out in many families. I'm sure people can understand. Like, there are many families where one child is the child who feels that strong sense of obligation to, be with their parents, or to be there for their parents, or to be there for their family. And it usually does come down to one sibling, sometimes two. So I don't know. I don't think Harry's a dick. I think that George got a raw deal.
And I'm saying that he is constantly suppressing all these things, and it's building up to what's eventually going to happen.
Oh, I don't disagree with you. I mean, I think George is rightfully frustrated and angry that he is not able to follow his dreams, but his brother is.
And I still think Harry's a dick because he sprung it on George. Hey, I can be told at any point in time, but this is my new life. Fuck you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But so what's so like the Harry thing starts an interesting, like we're focusing on that part, but I mean this whole chunk of the movie is very clearly a ramping up of tension, and this is where the movie for me actually becomes almost a noir, right? Because from here until the suicide attempt, George doesn't have options, right? A lot of what happens is out of his control in some way, shape, or form. Or when it is in his control, it's because he has a series of bad choices and go and make the least bad one. So, like, he could tell Harry, "No, you have to do this," but then that ruins the family dynamic, and he loves that too much. So it's okay. So I will keep doing this. And then he George wants to go on his honeymoon, but the run of the bank happens, and so he's like, okay, well, then we'll put the money from the honeymoon in, which was Mary's decision, but still, he's like, okay, then we'll do this. We'll put the money into, give
But
the money out to people.
George doesn't decide that. I want to make sure that we establish that.
Sure, right,
Mary
right.
decides that. So that
Yeah,
is a strength point for Mary, because I want to like highlight Mary's points of character, because
No,
we
but
focus a
I
lot
mean,
on George. That's a choice she made for them and she executed.
right, but he could have said no to that.
right. He could
Right,
have
is
said,
my
no, we're
point.
not going to do that. But he didn't.
Right, and he did. He's a good guy.
But I
And
agree
then
with you. Absolutely, Mary, God bless her, because I don't know if I could have. I mean, I think I would have done that, honestly, because you do what you have to do to help your family survive. And she understands that. She and George both understand that deeply.
Mhm.
Can we talk about the run on the bank scene? Because this is the
Yeah.
scene that breaks my heart in many
Mhm.
ways. Because it shows the good, bad, and ugly of
Yep.
society, right?
Yeah.
You've got the people who are demanding their money. They want every single cent. And then you've got the woman, I can't remember her name, Miss Carter, Miss something. Anyway, and he says, "How much do you need?" And she says, 1750. I mean, it's like,
Right.
it is such a moment of, and he like kisses her on the cheek and he's like, God
Mm.
bless, like, that is a moment, like, I don't know. I just feel like, oh, by the way, and that actress is Grandma Walton, if you watched the Waltons.
Oh,
So
Uh,
did you
yeah.
know, though, that originally they'd scripted out for her to say $17, and on the day of shooting, to go back to your Capra likes to improvise, he said, say 1750 when you tell him. And she
Oh,
goes
yeah.
up, it's to 1750. And so Stewart, in response, kisses her because he's slightly thrown off to like make the scene work.
well, it
Right.
makes so much more of an impression to say
Oh,
$17.50, because it's such more of an exact, she needs that. She knows, she has calculated in her brain, this is the money I need in order to be able to pay my bills.
Right.
And that 50
and that's
cents.
what all the stuff said about Capra is like that exact total sounds more realistic and it'll get a laugh.
Yeah. I didn't laugh at it. To
Brilliant.
me, like, that was heartbreaking, but like in a
Right.
good way. Do you know what I mean? Like just
Mhm.
because then you have
And,
all the jerks who are like, give me all my money.
yeah, and like even $242 guy, right? I mean, he's just adamant about it. He's being an asshole about this, but at the same time, it's very clear that he's scared. It's not he's not just being a belligerent jerk for the sake of being
That's
a
true.
jerk. He's like, no, I put my money into this and I need my money out, and everything's going to to pot, and I need my $240 back. He mostly comes across the jerk when George is like, just how much do you need to get by, and he's like, I need $242. Okay, that's when you're being an asshole now, buddy. But up to that point in time, it's like it's not reasonable. It's not reasonable at all, but it's understandable.
Oh, absolutely. It's your
He's
money,
just scared.
right? It's your money that you've earned and you're scared.
Right,
And
Well,
but the thing is that what I like is that he's doing this, and then at that pivot point when George's like, "Okay, I will give you some money. I will give you my money, some money," and everybody else is coming around to George's side, and so when that guy stays on, you could see kind of how the crowd dynamic changes during that scene. Because before they're all pointed at George. Like if you look at how they're all faced, they're all facing towards George, like they're angry. And then when he says that, the whole crowd kind of turns and looks at that one guy. And so when the next person kind of says $20, because of how the scene was shot, you buy that everyone has gone into George's side, even though they're not saying it in intelligible words, all kind of just thesaurus in the background. So it's a nice way of, but because that guy, that actor, that character anchors that scene, like from that point on, everyone else coming afterwards is believable because of that one moment of the guy who refuses to budge.
and the thing is, though, that guy is now going to Potter, and so it's like his $242 will
Yep.
be $121 because it
Yep.
already said Potter's only taking half.
Yep.
So when everyone else pulls through with George in a couple days, that is a repercussion for that guy, which then goes back and follows in kind of with the Hayes Code because he became a villain of that scene.
mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have this kind of it's not a steady decline. There's lots of the down, and then George makes the best of a bad lot and pulls it back up, and then comes back down again. Then he builds Bailey Park, and it's like, okay, no, this is great. Relatively, it's underpriced housing. It's undercutting the slums. Everyone likes it. And then the Potter scene comes and just drops him right down again. Because again, George had a choice to make, which was compromise myself or do the right thing. And he's like, for him, the least bad option was do the right thing.
Yeah.
I
Can we
want to.
talk about that honeymoon scene where
Mhm.
the
Can we go
cop
back a little
and
bit further than that first?
oh, okay.
Oh,
Because it'll lead into yours.
mm.
Okay. I'll allow it.
Thank you. I want to go back and talk about when George goes to Mary's house and the mother's upstairs and Mary's downstairs,
Oh.
and she puts on the song and is playing the song to try to like woo George back, and even the art. So we get the image of them, and Mary has gone to college. Mary has left for like a 4-year period to come back, while
Mhm.
George has still been trapped here. So that's like another dynamic they're layering on top of the movie for us. But the song when she's playing that's making her happy, that they were originally singing when they had that scene, would be something that would make George sad, because that is also the night that his father had a stroke and died, on
Mhm.
top of all the other trauma that he's been facing. So like that dynamic they're playing out is interesting to watch and intense, and to see the dynamic of both of them as they sort of change and eventually sort of join together as a union. But on the phone, when George's friend calls with a deal that could have made George rich, and he turns it down, like that is a choice that George had that he could have made a different way, because his money
I
then wasn't tied into the building and loan or anything
right.
else. That's a bad choice that he made because he was upset about what had happened with his brother and everything else in his life.
I
Mm.
think about that one when Eddie, have you seen the movie Defending Your Life?
I don't think I have.
Oh, Eddie. All right.
I get that a lot in this podcast.
She's going to come back for this one.
I'm going to come back. We will watch Defending Your Life. It's a
Okay.
favorite. It's with Al Brooks and Meryl Streep. I mean, how can you beat it? Rip
Mhm.
Torn.
Ooh, okay.
And it's the after. It's like purgatory, the afterlife, and
Mhm.
as part of it, you go on trial. you have to defend your life. You have to defend the choices that you made, and did you become like a better version of yourself, essentially.
Okay.
It's a comedy, believe it or not.
Well, Rip Torn's involved. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and Al Brooks, who's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that scene made me think about that, because in defending your life, he's like, there's a scene where he's like, they look back on your life, and one of the scenes is he's afraid to make a decision. And the prosecutor says, why are you afraid? Like, what was going through your brain? Why didn't you decide to do it? Like, what was holding you back from making this decision that would have changed your life? And I think about it with that phone call, because that decision, I mean, you think, who knew? Like, he didn't know that this was going to be a blockbuster thing, but
Right.
it was also an opportunity that he missed, because in his brain, it wasn't, his brain was in a different place. Yeah. Anyway.
Which, now that you say that, now that we talk about that, is an interesting parallel to Gower. Gower also had very bad news and made a bad decision. And
That's
George
right.
was able to save Gower, but no one was able to save George.
Yeah. You want to talk about the honeymoon scene? Sorry. So we can move you to that.
I love the honeymoon scene where his friends make it like a romantic. First of all, she makes it a romantic thing, and then his friends pitch in. I mean, to me, that also just built the case of what a community that they have built for each other and for their family, whether, no matter how down things are, they have people that they can rely on. And we'll see that obviously come back later.
Right.
But I love that scene, and that he doesn't. I also was worried that he was going to walk in. I mean, the first time I saw it, that he could walk in and say, and just have a temper, like have a, like, this is ridiculous. What a waste of money. What do we, like all of this stuff, which he does to like, an extent at one point, but not in that scene. In that scene, he sees what's being done, and he acknowledges it in a meaningful way. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And I think it's a good point too, is because if I can go to the Potter scene, then you're right that George's been in a lot of scenes where a very logical reaction, both either as a person or in Hollywood script writing, would have been for him to lash out and be angry. But he's not. He's a nice guy. He's almost perpetually a nice guy. And you see, but the way that Stewart pitches it, we've talked before, you can see the frustration there, but he's not mad at people. He's mad at life, at the situation. And so when Potter offers him the money, and George, trying to be the nice guy, it's like, it's a smart move, this is a smart move. And then finally he just fucking snaps. and you see the first genuine anger out of George in the movie, because he finally has someone to be mad at.
Yeah, it's a clear, like, this is your fault, right? Like,
yes.
This is, yes.
And so it's almost cathartic of like, yes, there's finally someone in this movie that we can all be mad at. And so, like with George, it's like going, yeah, fuck that guy. I don't like him either. Yell at him, because because George, at this point, it's going to change, but at this point, he's not yelling at his wife. He's not yelling at his friends. He's not yelling at his brother. He's not yelling at his family. He's not yelling at his kids. And these are all things that, especially in the 40s, would have been seen as relatively normalized. Even when Mr. Gower was beating him, he didn't get mad.
Nope.
So to see him finally angry is fascinating, and sets up the next stage of where this is going to go.
I'd like to point out, though, that for people that are now, if I remember right, that is a roughly $200,000 to $300,000 a year that George has turned down for us living today, to say no and walk away from it for an easy gig that sent you to other countries and trips.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
For the community is why he turned it down.
It's a big deal.
Yep.
Okay, so the next thing,
Jill.
What?
Since you mentioned his friends, I want to say what his friends' names are, then you're good to go. Bert and Ernie, please go ahead.
Yes, that is true. Bert and Ernie. How sweet. On Christmas Eve, the town prepares a hero's welcome for Harry. A Navy fighter pilot awarded the Medal of Honor for preventing a kamikaze attack on a troop ship. Uncle Billy goes to Potter's bank to deposit $8,000 in the building and loans
Oh
money.
no.
He taunts Potter with a newspaper headline about Harry and then absent-mindedly wraps the cash in Potter's newspaper. Potter finds and keeps the money while Billy cannot recall how he misplaced it. With a bank examiner reviewing the company's records, George fruitlessly retraces Billy's steps. Frustrated and angered by Billy's blunder, which may lead to scandal and jail, George resents the sacrifices he has made and the family that has kept him trapped in Bedford Falls. He appeals to Potter for a loan, offering his meager life insurance policy as collateral. Potter scoffs that George is worth more dead than alive, refuses to help, and phones the police. Ugh, I will tell you, that bank scene makes, I mean, if I could hide under, oh.
Yeah.
You made the sound you make whenever we watch Larry David for me when we see that bank scene every time.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just heartbreaking because, I mean, all of us have done something, maybe not to this extent, but
Right.
all of us have done something that is like so, you're so mad at yourself and maybe you can't remember exactly what you did with something, or you've somehow messed something up so badly. We've all had that feeling. And then for all of this and all of the sacrifice that George has made, and then dear Uncle Billy with the string reminders on his fingers.
Yeah. And again, like, now that George has let slip and his anger has slipped out, it doesn't entirely go back because for the first time, he's angry at a member of his family. It's brief, and he tucks it back, but he looks like he's about to hurt Uncle Billy for a second there.
I love that scene, by the way.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a great scene. He is as real as, and you empathize with George.
Mhm.
I mean, you empathize with Uncle Billy too, but you understand exactly what's going on in George's brain. Like, that's.
And the other thing I love about this is oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, going to jail for that financial loss is no joke, like, regardless of anything. Right. And because I think George already knows if he goes to jail, he's lost his family. If Uncle Billy goes to jail, he's going to die in jail. Those are the only two options left.
And the way the whole scene is pitched is the thing that makes it so heartbreaking is that it's just one step close to comedy. Because the bank examiner's here, and so George is trying to distract the bank examiner while Uncle Billy's trying to find the money. And then you see George going through random drawers and trying to bluff the bank examiner as long as he can while they go. And so, like, it's paced like it in a slightly different tone, slightly different presentation. This could have been just a farce, like a straight up hilarious Scooby-Doo style farce.
Interesting, yeah.
But because it's so close to comedy, the tragedy hits even harder because it's like you're trying not to laugh, and it's like it's not funny. It's so heartbreaking, and so the tension of it and the comedic pacing just really amps up the tension. And then on top of it, to have Potter say this quiet part out loud of like, "You can go to jail for this. I'm going to call the police right now for this. You're worth dead more than alive."
Why would you go to Potter after you've been thwarting all his attempts for decades, and then you insult him and make fun of him after he tried to bribe you? Other than for plots of the movie, I can't understand any reason why you would go there.
Oh, a desperation.
Desperation.
It's just, he has literally no... Now, it's interesting because he doesn't feel like he can go to anyone, right? And maybe he can't. They don't have much money.
We've established he has a rich friend.
That is true, but he said he couldn't get him on the phone, and he needed the money quickly.
He needed money that day,
right? And like money didn't move as quickly then as it does now either. So, being able to get that money from his friend, probably not easy. So yeah, I think desperation is what caused it.
And
But
then, of
it is
course, us as the
interesting
okay,
because he does have a community. So like,
right.
could he have gone to his community, or was he so embarrassed? Because I would be.
If we're going to go there, I don't think it's because he's embarrassed. I think it's because he's felt that he's held the community up by himself for decades.
Right. And he doesn't want to ask anybody for help.
Right.
So and
He's
it's
already
not
asked
necessarily
them.
that he won't. Go ahead.
I would just say, like, he's already asked them once to have faith in him and that he would have the money back. So he can't go back to them again.
Right. Yeah.
And because they count on him, so he can't need them to have it reversed.
Right. And it's even better because we as the audience actually, one of the few times we as the audience know slightly more than George does, because we see Potter take the money. So the whole time Potter's lambasting him, we as the audience know he knows exactly where the $8,000 is.
Yes.
Potter could literally loan George back his own money.
Yes.
And make
With
nothing
interest.
profit off of it. Yeah. And just, literally just get free interest out of George for a very long time. But he needs to hurt George for what George did to him.
Yep. Yep.
If Potter gave him the money, we'd be talking about the Christmas Carol instead.
Right. Which, I mean, to be fair, on some levels, this is a deconstructionist Christmas Carol. But I mean, yes.
Yes.
That'll be a much more literal interpretation of Christmas Carol.
I don't know if we're going to move on, but before we do, I want to take a moment to talk about Zuzu and her petals, because such a cute kid. But there is also a gingerbread cookie at the time called Zuzu. They were gingerbreads, and Jimmy Stewart calls her his little gingerbread.
That's cute.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
That's cute.
Also, that kid was totally faking. Zuzu wasn't sick.
Nope. Kids don't fake being sick, Eddie. Come on. I'm a parent. I would know if kids fake being sick. They go,
having been a kid.
What I do love, I mean, they show how loving of a father he is, how doting he is on his kids, which is why when he goes home after all of this, and he is, it again, heartbreaking, like just how he treats his children. And how do you compartmentalize that to go home to your kids and actually not lash out? That's tough to do. Yeah. All right.
Now go on.
I mean,
yeah.
Because I think we're talking about him.
George flees Potter's office, gets drunk at the bar, and prays for help. Contemplating suicide, he goes to a nearby bridge. Before George can jump, Clarence dives into the freezing water, and George rescues him. When George wishes he had never been born, Clarence shows George a timeline in which he never existed. Bedford's Fall is now Pottersville, an unsavory town occupied by sleazy entertainment, venues, and callous people. Mr. Gower was jailed for manslaughter because George wasn't there to stop him from poisoning the customer. George's mother doesn't know him. Uncle Billy was institutionalized after the building and loan failed. Bailey Park is a cemetery where George discovered Harry's grave. Without George, Harry had drowned as a child, and without Harry to save them, the troops aboard the transport ship were killed. George finds that Mary is an old maid librarian, where he grabs her and claims to be her husband, and she screams and runs away.
Yeah, no kidding. So
right?
Guy is like, "Hey, I'm your husband." I'm like, "What the?
Get the hell away from me, you stalker."
That happens to me like a couple times a week.
It does.
Sure, yeah.
What are you doing here? Who are you? Yeah.
I ask, "Where's my dowry?" And then the other person runs away.
Right. That's how you do it.
It's interesting that this is it really is a relatively short period of the film, but it is a huge impact, obviously. And this goes back to the original quote from the beginning of the podcast, like to see the impact that he's made on people's lives, and then that they've made on other people's lives because of him. I think it's easy to forget that we all have an impact on the world around us, even when we feel like maybe we're alone or we, I don't know. As I get closer to 50, you think about your legacy and you think about like, what am I leaving behind? But I don't know that you ever can truly know the impact that you have had on people's lives. So
Mhm.
You can't.
I
Even
love
a
this.
smile at a random person that changed their day could have made hundreds of people's lives better. You have
Yeah.
no idea.
Or
Yeah.
things that you don't even remember. I mean, I'll tell this story about Facebook is not my favorite, but I would say close to 10 years ago on Facebook, I got a message out of the blue from a guy that I knew from elementary school. And
And
Courtney
then I
was a
drove over to his house and punched him in the nose.
yeah, right. I know.
How dare you? Look at my wife like that.
Courtney was a very like quiet kid. But I, always thought he was nice and I don't know. And he wrote me this lovely note about how I was so supportive and, he was being bullied and I was, really nice to him. And it was like this, and this not to toot my own horn. This is to say, I didn't remember any of that.
Right.
I didn't remember the impact that I had on him. I didn't know the impact I had on him. I mean, it's nice. Of course, it was lovely to hear that I was not an asshole.
Mhm.
At least not to him, maybe to other people, but not to him. But yeah, I think that, we just will have no idea what the impact is that we make.
Yeah. I mean, again, not to toot my own horn, but even as an artist, sometimes you don't realize the impact you have, especially because it's such a remove. I had a woman come up to me at a convention, and she's like, "Can I give you a hug?" And I'm like, "Sure. Why?" And it turns out that the game I made, Pugmire, um, helped her autistic son to start to socialize because through the game he started playing a dog character and then he started using the dog character as a way to start finding a way to connect to people. And so we actually would call it putting on his dog face when he started to talk to people, and so he became much more verbal and vocal and engaging with people as a result of the game. And just like if I hadn't have made that stupid dog game, this kid's life would be different, you know?
It's not stupid,
Well,
but
No.
right. I say it depreciatively.
yes, no,
Um,
but and to know the impact, right?
right.
It's a
Yeah,
big effing deal.
it is.
And I also, the moments where similar to that, where you hear people who are willing to say, how appreciative they are or whatever, it makes me want to be more vocally appreciative of the people who have made an impact on my life, right? Like, because we
Right.
so often just let that go. We don't
Mhm.
let people in our lives know how important they are or how one day when they called or sent a text, it meant so much because
Yeah.
I was having a bad day that day, and just to hear from them made it better.
I've
Um,
actually, I've actively started doing that now when I can
yeah,
Mhm.
to let people know how much I appreciate them and everything else they've done.
yeah. It's a,
And frankly, for men in particular, it's hard.
oof. Y'all got all sorts of stuff that you need
We
to work
do.
out.
We
Yeah,
do.
I know.
This masculinity is toxic or something. I don't know.
Something like something like that. Well, like it's funny because my, girlfriends and I will talk about how we can't imagine, you know, being men because we talk to each other about pretty much everything, right? Like we
Mhm.
are, I mean, I'm an open book with just about everyone, but like it is, I think, yes, there's a challenge. And like, let's get back to the movie a little bit.
Mhm.
In this case, him being the breadwinner, him having to support his family financially, um, and keep it all together, right? Keep
Right.
himself together while his life is falling apart. I mean, that's a lot to ask of someone, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that the first part of this part where he lashes out his family and then goes to drink what's fascinating to me about that is that, on the one hand, it doesn't age well, but this is more of a fiction thing that Chris and I have dinged multiple times where it's like, this whole movie would be done if he had spent 5 minutes talking to his family, right? At this point in time, if he had just said, "Listen, I've lost $8,000. That's why I'm lashing out. I'm really sorry," and all tension is gone. So that is something that
this
was
is my last night as a free man.
right, right.
Yeah.
So that's frustrating. But on the other hand, what I find fascinating is the movie in 1946, he never hits his kids. He never
Mhm.
hits his wife. And he apologizes to all of them after flashing out. He then flashes out again briefly. But then once he realizes he can't stay here and apologize the way he should, he then leaves. He then removes himself from the situation,
Yeah, that's a big
which
deal.
is a
At that
level of
time?
awareness that most men could have today.
Oh
frankly.
God,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I
Mm.
mean, look, grown-ups apologizing to children is still sometimes difficult to do. And I'll
Okay.
say that as a grown-up, you know, who has to apologize to my child fairly regularly when I raise my voice or you know, or am not the best example for her or whatever. It can be hard to apologize to a child. So yes, in that example from 1946, I don't know. I would think that might be unusual. I don't know. I didn't live in 1946. I can't say one way or another, but
Right, but like I can in my head see a scene made today where Mary would have had to have prompted George to apologize to the kids,
Mhm.
right? And that doesn't happen. George proactively goes, "No, I need to apologize to every single one of my kids individually."
And then try to
And
engage with him to see
Yeah.
how
right,
everything is before he leaves.
yes.
yeah. And then we get into where he's right near his darkest, where he's at the bar. He's drinking, and you have that heartbreaking close up of Jimmy Stewart, and it's just lingering on his pain. But even then, Mr. Martini is trying to help him. The bartender is trying to help him. His community's still trying to help him, and he can't let them help him because of what's going on. He can't let them know what's going on. Again, slightly artificial. 5 minutes conversation would probably solve this.
But then
But the point. Oh, go ahead.
But then you get the humorous beat with the husband of the wife who he's just
Right.
insulted,
Yes.
punches him to undercut some of that. So then they can build it back up by having everyone help him because you get a quick laugh to release tension. And then you go back and make it all about that moment again. Like, that is brilliant.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting about the movie is that every time George does directly lash out at someone, he is punished for it.
Mhm.
He lashed out at Potter, got punished for it. He lashed out at a teacher, got punished for it. So it's interesting kind of moral moments. The movie also saying, "Hey, don't do this." But when someone is a stranger, he feels slightly more comfortable doing it. But these people he cares about, he can't. So George is not an unalloyed hero. He's not a perfect good guy. He's complex. He has frustrations, and when he gets hit, he's like, "Yeah, no, I earned that." Right? He owns it. Even when he gets punched, he doesn't start a fight. He doesn't lash back out. The guy's like, "No, yeah, that's fair." I mean, it's of course he then, like you said, tries to leave. It's the I'm not making the situation better.
Right.
Once again, I should go.
Can we turn to Clarence when Clarence is up? We started at the top of the podcast about it.
Yeah.
Now that Clarence is here, what do you have to say, the two of you have to say about Clarence, his arrival, the fact that Jimmy Stewart, that sweat, by the way, he's in his face because it was so hot recording that day.
I believe it.
I mean, Clarence is a sweet, you kind of, it's great casting. It's fabulous casting. And I do like that, they don't, they don't have him like constantly defending himself as like, I'm your guardian angel. I'm your, like, he says it like offhanded ways in a lot of cases. Like, oh yeah, I'm 200 or whatever he is, how old he is. He's 200 years old, something like that. You know, things like that that are just, it is a little bit, it's hard to say understated in this movie, but it is a little understated in terms of the heaven bit.
Right.
So they actually reeled back some of the religious pieces to the movie. They even changed like parts of the movie so it was less religious than it was before. Because it didn't play well.
I, on the one hand, I certainly want to compliment how Clarence was played and how it's written and the stuff we call back. But I wouldn't be me if there was a small part of me that goes, this is basically an early incarnation of the Doctor. I'm 200 years old. I don't understand how time works. What time is it?
Oh.
I have this copy of Tom Sawyer because it's stuck in my coat for whatever reason.
Are you saying he's the 15th Doctor or something like that? We don't know.
No, he would be one of the negative doctors.
He'd be
Right.
Before
the zeroth Doctor.
we had William.
He was sent by a mysterious alien scientist to go back and fix a problem in the timeline. He's a Time Lord.
He doesn't have a time ring, Eddie, so that doesn't work.
You don't see him. He comes off screen. You don't know what's back there.
You don't know.
He could be a TARDIS.
That's very funny.
But I mean, I'm being silly here, but also like, you're right. The religious stuff is so stripped back that this could be a science fiction story. It's almost there. All the religious stuff, with the exception of that very early scene, even then, it's only because he's called an angel in that scene with flashing lights. All of the other stuff, Clarence calls himself an angel. That could just very well be as far. You can't understand because I'm a pan-dimensional being, so you might as well call me a guardian angel.
If not, but if also not for the phrase where they say every time a bell rings, an angel gets her wings. And that's kind of what the movie ends on. Which, funnily enough, though, if you look at the start of the movie, the Liberty Bell is ringing multiple times, so that means multiple angels are getting their wings. Just saying.
Right, but I mean, like, but my point is, like, yeah, I mean, there's just enough religious stuff that you can't entirely call it a sci-fi thing, but also you can't entirely call it Christian propaganda either, right? You know,
I would like to call it sci-fi.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, that's what my inclination is.
Jill,
but
what?
Angels of sci-fi.
You want me to weigh in? No, I'm not going to go as far as saying it's sci-fi, but I always appreciated that it wasn't. So as a Jewish girl growing up, it wasn't like Miracle on 34th Street where it's very Santa focused, which is something that like was never part of my stuff growing up. Now, that is my mother's favorite Christmas movie, just so we're clear, Miracle on 34th Street.
I'm going to tell her that you sold her out like that.
I know. Well, she'd be happy to admit to it. She loves that movie. And it is heartwarming and lovely. But this movie felt as separated from Christmas as a Christmas movie kind of can be. Because you really don't, there isn't a lot about Christmas in the movie. You see it at the end, right? Like the tree and the everything. But there isn't a lot about Christmas. It's kind of interesting to think about. It's a winter movie.
Originally, they didn't envision it as a Christmas classic. It's because of that weird 20-year period where it was sort of a copyright free, and it was aired around Christmas where it became a Christmas staple.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's more a morality tale than anything, right? I mean,
for me, you're right. I mean, I think this was my original argument for when we talk about Die Hard is like the only reason why it's not. Okay, I take it back. One of the reasons why it's seen as a Christmas movie is because people insist, ironically, it's a Christmas movie, and therefore it's kind of fallen in that category. But for this is interesting to me because this is a movie that epitomizes the Christmas spirit.
Yes.
Is very much the kind of thing that a Christmas movie will end on, but the words Christmas spirit is never used. the fact that it's Christmas is just a framing device for the actual conflict.
Right.
Yes.
So, right, it's right on the line of whether it's a Christmas movie or not, because like if it wasn't Christmas, arguably the movie would be the same, but I also feel like the ending wouldn't have the same hit if it wasn't a Christmas.
Yes.
They just wouldn't sing Old Lang Syne is the only difference. Which,
Maybe.
funnily enough, originally they weren't singing Old Lang Syne. They were singing some song called like Old Joe until they changed it in editing.
Old Joe.
Jeez.
Well, an Old Lang Syne, is that, sorry, pardon my...
It's like
New Year's,
Christmas
right?
/ New Year's.
I was going to
yeah,
say it's
kind of-
New Year's, isn't it? I've always
Yeah.
heard it for New Year's, not Christmas, but maybe I'm not aware.
So now, like I would almost say this is not a Christmas movie because Christmas, a holiday, is not intrinsically moving the plot in any way or fashion.
That is a controversial statement.
It's
Right,
how is
right.
Christmas moving the plot or integral to the plot? Does Jimmy Stewart like pull a Christmas duct tape thing off his back from a gun that he used to shoot Hans Gruber in the head? No.
It's an interesting, I mean, I've never really thought of it consciously, but yeah, it doesn't.
So hilariously, into an earlier point about how hard it is to qualify this film, I actually just looked on Wikipedia just to see what it said. And Wikipedia is classified as a Christmas supernatural drama, which is technically correct and also completely missing the point.
Wow. Wow. That is something.
I think this comes down to this movie is really hard to quantify.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap up here. We still have a bit left to talk about.
All right. Jill, would you like to read the last bit as you're the
Sure.
guest on the podcast?
I'd be happy to. George flees back to the bridge and begs for his life back. His wish granted, he rushes home to await his arrest. Meanwhile, Mary and Billy have rallied the townspeople who donate more than enough to replace the missing money. Harry arrives and toasts George as, quote, the richest man in town. Among the donations, George finds a copy of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, a gift from Clarence inscribed, quote, remember, no man is a failure who has friends. Thanks for the wings. When a bell on the Christmas tree rings, George's youngest daughter, Zuzu, explains that every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings, while the people are singing Old Lang Syne.
Right.
So what is the bit about The Adventures of Tom Sawyer? Because I don't understand the connection.
So what I did catch this because Clarence, in a throwaway line when he first appears, says, I've been really enjoying reading Tom Sawyer. I can't wait for his next book, to kind of imply that he doesn't realize how much time has passed, and implies the last time Clarence was on Earth was
Got it. Okay. Years of not understanding that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Right. Yes. And he does at one point in time have a copy in hand, but it is a blink and you miss it scene, right?
Yes.
It is when he's changing all his clothes and talking to George. It's in the midst of all of that is when it's very, very fast.
Okay. Got it.
Only reason why I caught it was because I had to watch the scene again because I had something distracted me at the moment, and so I missed that scene, so I had to rewind it, and then I got to watch the scene twice. And it's like, oh, okay, Tom Sawyer, that's such a throwaway line. But again, I was like, oh, it's the Doctor. There's quirky, weird stuff. I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And then I saw Tom Sawyer at the end. That's how I knew. Yeah. But the other thing I like is, Harry's like, George is the richest man in town. And what I like is that when you're watching this movie, even though this is a scene where there's literally a stack of cash in shot, that's not what Harry's saying.
Absolutely.
You're talking about all the people that are. He's rich in friends,
Mm-hmm.
but the movie doesn't spell that out. Doesn't need to. That's a confidence that I can appreciate in an ending.
And we see another black person.
No, we see the same black person.
Oh, same black.
Jill, do I need to ask you the question?
No.
Wow.
So at first, I knew what question you were talking about too.
No, I mean it really is, and Chris knows this about me. Like I pride myself on building community. Like that's something that I love. and you never know when you're going to need somebody. Like, you just don't know. And so, yeah, community is everything. Like, it really is. And so we have many different communities here for sure. That has been amazing. And communities that are built out of, some are built out of silly stuff. Some are built because we have a dog. And so I know all the people in the neighborhood because we walk the dog.
Yep.
And they
But
call out to Ziggy whenever we're walking because they don't know my name.
that is true. I mean, that's true. Look,
To
I
be
know
fair,
all
you
the
are the
dogs' names.
Ziggy's the more important person.
She's absolutely. Well, and like, so the dog walker. So there was one day where we were selling a car and we had to get the license plate off and it was rusted on. But I knew that one of our neighbors who has one of the dogs, he's really handy. So I texted him and said,
3 of the 4 off.
yeah.
Like, I hear you telling the story, but you're not giving me the
Let's point
credit
out,
for doing
he's
all this
not
work to get the
completely
stuff
inept.
done.
He's not completely inept.
Just slightly inept, right?
But like, you I texted him, and next thing I knew, he came over with like multiple tools, and he, helped. But so, yeah, I mean, it's a small example, but community is everything, and wealth and success. I mean, Chris and I have talked about like how do you measure success? That's like something I think we all go through in life. Like, am I a success? Like, how would I measure that?
It's definitely not being an indie TTRPG creator. I said that. If you got a problem, come talk to me. Indie TTRPG creator to fellow indie.
Right. I'll fight you. Like Mr.
But
Potter.
you have a community through that. And
right.
Well, I've got Eddie.
You got Eddie.
Who feels pity to come and do a podcast with me.
Really?
I don't know
God bless Eddie.
if Eddie counts as a community.
God bless Eddie.
I get paid dozens and dozens of cents, yes.
All right, so closing thoughts on the movie. Sorry.
Well, I mean, I do have thoughts, but really I want to quick up the community thing. Is that one thing I like about this movie and about the community is the not realizing you have the community until it's there. Because it's one thing, like you said, to be able to say, okay, I'm part of this extant community. I have a label for this community. It's the ad hoc ones that get you. One example is one thing that took me a while to understand about living in the UK is a parcel delivery, package delivery. It is not uncommon to have it just dropped off at a neighbor. That's actually an option you could put on your slip is like, hey, if I'm not in, just drop it off at my neighbor's house.
Weird.
That's so
so when you're in flats, it's a moot point. It's like, just leave it in the lobby. I don't care. But since we moved into a house, we now there's a neighbor next to us who's usually out while we're all working from home. And so we have usually a package or two, and then they'll come over late at night and we'll give them their package. And so we've got to know them a little bit because we hold packages for them. And a couple times, a neighbor across the street has held a couple packages for us. And so we've gotten to know our neighbors a little bit just from that little accidental thing, right?
Cool. Yeah.
So yeah, it's wild how that can happen. But closing thoughts to the movie. First of all, I really liked it. I'm glad I got a chance to watch it again. I'm glad I had to watch it properly. So I appreciate that. I was surprised that the whole thing the movie is known for, the whole thing is famous for, which is he goes back to see what happens to his life when he wasn't there, is the most boring part of the film. Notice we didn't talk at all about that. We skipped right over that whole chunk of the movie.
That's why it's so short. It just shows like actions if you weren't there. And all you need to know is it would suck if you didn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. And like, it's also the most heavy-handed part of the movie. It's the tree isn't damaged, and his mother doesn't even recognize him, and he's like, oh my god, and like, and this is one of the few points where I genuinely think George is an idiot, because like 7 times he has to be told, we don't know who you are. Well, you know who I am. I don't know who you are. You're terrorizing an innocent woman, George. Calm the fuck down. Right. And then when he gets back to, okay, whatever, I'll be arrested, but I'm glad to be alive. as long as people I love are safe. And I'm completely back in. I'm completely back into the final ramp up of the movie.
Yeah.
A lot of it, I mean, obviously a lot of it goes to Jimmy Stewart. But frankly, the supporting cast are all fantastic too. They really help to, because when George is not on screen or when George is in a marginalized part of the scene, the other characters talking and emphasizing what kind of character George is. So it's just top to bottom. Well, not top to bottom, except for a small chunk near the end. It's just a really solid film. It's not structurally dense. It's not perfectly aligned. It's kind of a whole mess of a film. But it's emotionally tight. The emotions are very easy to follow. They're great to follow. And you said it's not a long film. It's 2 hours. It does not feel like 2 hours.
It's like 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it at all, especially for a 1948 film. I have seen modern films that drag more than this 1946 film.
That's true.
It's only about 20 minutes shorter than Wicked, Part 1.
Wicked is Part 1? I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was
Haven't
the
seen
whole
it yet?
play.
Nope.
No, I haven't seen the movie yet.
Eddie doesn't like musicals.
I don't
I like
care.
musicals. Wow. Well, okay then.
I mean that in a you still need to see it.
All right.
I mean
Jill.
that in a seriously, you have no choice in this matter.
That's exactly it.
Stop tormenting Eddie. What did you think of It's a Wonderful Life?
I mean, I've already made my opinion clear. I love this movie. I love what it's. I love I love the messages of family, community. Being appreciative and grateful for those around you. And I love the relationships. Like I just love the relationships that George has with each of the other characters, including some of the townspeople that he has maybe a word with but they develop a very clear story of relationships, which is something that I really appreciate. So love the movie.
So my thoughts, rather than recap everything that Jill and Eddie said, I agree with both of them. I enjoy the movie more, and I've seen it more so with Jill since I was by myself. I will instead give us the multiverse that Eddie referenced by giving you a bit of the other universe where we would have covered The Lion in Winter, ending the podcast with What We Do in Dungeons Needs the Shades of Day. And we'll stop there.
Oh my God. I'm sorry,
multiverse.
everybody. I'm sorry.
Well, you have learned the lesson that Chris and I have also learned, which is that don't agree to do a film before you watch it first sometimes, because it's
Totally
like,
fair.
why did we choose this movie?
Totally
This
fair.
is only the third time I think we've ever said this on the podcast.
And we will totally never do it again, except for next time we do it again.
Well, thank you.
Happy holidays, everyone
Thanks.
out there.
This
Yes.
was fun.
Buy our swag, enjoy our stuff, and we will be back next week where Chris and I we'll finish up the Cornetto trilogy. Happy
Maybe.
holidays.
Jill's dancing to the outro.